and namaste to our colleagues and friends from the Pacific and friends joining from other regions. Thank you for joining today's important podcast. In today's episode, we will be talking about online gender-based violence, a very important issue to tackle. Women, girls, and marginalized groups experience violence and abuse online and also offline. And there was a surge of violence and abuse online during COVID. We're still celebrating International Women's Month, and we want to raise the bar to tackle the crisis of online gender-based violence and abuse, particularly to support women, girls, marginalized groups such as persons with disabilities, people living in rural and remote communities, and the LGBTQI communities. Today, we have a panel of experts from the Pacific region joining us to talk about the form of gender injustice and discrimination that takes place online and in the digital world. So let's invite our amazing speakers to introduce themselves. We will start with Sarai, Tevita. Welcome from Samoa. Please introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity, Anju. I'm Sarai Tevita from Samoa, working as an ICT director for the National University of Samoa, and I'm really proud to be part of this session, and thank you for the invitation. I'll discuss more when it comes to my part. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarai. And we also have Jacqui Berrell. Please, Jacqui, welcome and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Anju. So my name is Jacqui Berrell. I'm a communications advisor with Pacific Women Lead and also a former communications consultant. And I'm very pleased to be here today to share information from experts and colleagues and also share indicators and insights from researchers, particularly around our Pacific Girl program. Thank you.
Great, welcome, ladies. I'm glad that this is an all-female panel. I would have hoped for some male members and colleagues to join us today, but unfortunately, there's connectivity issues. So, Jacqui, my question is for you. In simple words, what is online gender-based violence, and what are some of the contributing factors of OGBV?
Thank you, Anju. So before we move to contributing factors of GBV online, perhaps if we can just take a moment to reflect and just first look at the contributing factors that actually cause gender-based violence, that causes GBV, and that's gender. So specifically gender inequality. Now we know that an estimated 2 in 3 women in the Pacific experience gender-based violence from an intimate partner. So the key contributing factor of GBV is gender, primarily being a woman or a girl, but there's also high rates of GBV that also impact people with diverse sexual orientations, gender identities and expressions. So again, it's about gender. Now those figures are mainly for GBV in homes and communities. So what about online? It's the same. The key contributing factor to GBV is gender. Now, when we say gender-based violence, what do we mean? Yeah, and is violence, is it something that can only be physical? And if so, how can online violence occur? So with gender-based violence, it can be physical, it can be sexual, or it can be mental harm that is caused. And it can be emotional, it can be coercive, for example, or it can basically just deprive people of their liberties. And it's all based on someone's gender or their gender identity. That's what causes the violence. So online GBV is very similar. Basically, it causes harm. It's just the delivery that's different. And I'm just going to read this out. So it's technology that's used against people, disproportionately women based on their gender. And just noting that for online GBV, the term is very similar to other terms you would have heard: online harassment, cyberbullying, and cybersexism. The only difference being that gender-based violence, online gender-based violence, is really all about gender specifically. Just one more thing too, with contributing factors, whilst I think we need to keep focusing on the fact this is about people's gender, we really want to talk about online and what can we do with online. So with that, there's sort of 2 contributing factors that that basically make online GBV exist. One is the perpetrators who perpetrate gender-based violence with online, they basically have more ways to perpetrate. They have more channels to exponentially cause harm. The second thing is around education. So a lot of people are not necessarily educated on how to use social media and online channels in a safe way that protects themselves. And just to be very clear, there is no excuse for gender-based violence. There is absolutely none, but we can help people try to better protect themselves. And that's something that we can do. Just on a final note, the other thing about online gender-based violence is that there's the issue of impunity. So people can go online and they can be anonymous. They can do really horrible things. They can abuse people, they can use fake accounts, they can catfish, and they can do all of that without anyone knowing who they are. They totally get away with it. And that causes perhaps more people to be tempted to cause this harm than perhaps would have otherwise done. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jacqui. And I think you nailed it as terms, when you talk about the main factor, you talked about gender equality as a starting point. And I think it's a great entry point and introduction to what we are going to talk about. And you also raised a very important thing about education and raising awareness. I think this is key and critical. So in any part of our work, I think we need to continue doing this. So I have a second question for you, Jacqui. Do you think social media has an influence on online GBV? If so, how and why? And how do you have any examples from the work that you're doing, or maybe from any of the countries that you worked with?
Yeah, thanks, Anju. I know I might be repeating myself, but again, even the influence, we got to keep reminding ourselves, gender-based violence, online or otherwise, it's about gender. So we can't blame social media, but we still need to address this issue. But in terms of influence, there was a really great article in the Global Citizen that was published last year. And it basically was explaining that when the internet opened its doors, it basically also opened its doors not just to people being able to connect, but it also opened the doors to discrimination, virtual human rights violations, and so many other issues. So with everything good, unfortunately, things bad come as well. But there's opportunities to address that. In terms of examples to mention, I will mention a Pacific Girl example, but just in the context of the Pacific, what makes this challenge a particular challenge in the Pacific is that through our Pacific Girl program, we've got girls, more than 220 girls from across the Pacific were involved in the design of the Pacific Girl program. One of the top 6 issues that they identified was gender-based violence and coercion, so in person and online. So they're calling it out. Our girls are worried. Now, what's significant is that in the Pacific, more than half of the population is young people. In Tonga, and Sarai, I will defer to you on this one, but latest data indicates that more than 40% of the population is under 15. So we can look at specific examples, and I'll chat to one in a moment, Tonga, but we really need to understand the context. And when you aggregate this up across this massive population, this is a really major issue in the Pacific. And it's something that really needs to address, especially for young people. So with Pacific Girl, for example, it's been working with the NGO Tevita project in Tonga, and it initiated a cyber safety activity whereby there was a company called Portable involved and other partners, including PACMAS, and they got together and they let the girls who participate in Tevita project actually lead this program to share their experiences in the absence of more research in the Pacific, share their experiences and the impact that was upon them in terms of online gender-based violence, sexual harassment, and also cyber safety, and for them to actually create some of their own interventions. I highlight this because what's really fantastic is Tevita Project now has since done several other activities around cyber harassment and cyber safety. So they've really picked it up and they're going on their own volition with other partners as well. So I think this is what we want to see more of, especially through organizations such as Pacific Women Lead, when we fund partners, there's nothing better than when the partners grab something and take it and move forward on their own. Thank you.
Great. I'm glad that you said you can't blame social media and you can't shut the internet down, because it's not fair on the good people doing amazing things online. And thanks for mentioning the Pacific Girl and the cyber safety activity in Tonga. I think this is a great example of how women and girls can lead these programs and create more awareness on online safety and cyber safety. And I know cyber safety, cyber security is on another level that we can talk about, but let's all focus on online gender-based violence, which is also an issue in terms of cyber safety and cyber security. Sarai, now I'm going to you. Do social media accounts such as Facebook, TikTok, Instagram flag inappropriate comments and posts that promote sexual harassment and discrimination? And from your perspective, do you think users are blocked for a certain period or banned in your country, particularly in Samoa? Maybe you can give some examples. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question, Anju. And I second what Jacqui mentioned about the technology and people and the gender. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that is the major issue now. People are blaming the technology and the social media, but my experience with various researchers being read, it's not really the technology, the social media, it's the people, and it's the gender, as we spoke of today, speaking of today, it's the gender-based. So according to the question, yes, there are the social media accounts such as Facebook and other social, they flag up these comments and they promote the sexual harassment discrimination. They are out there. And bear in mind that different countries have their own languages. And that is one of the hardest part that we can't block or we can't ban straight away, because the languages people are using, we don't understand their local languages. For example, if they swear in Samoan words, the English people, the Chinese people, they don't understand, but it's out there, it's open, it's out there in the cyberspace. So we can't really control that kind of post or comments on the Facebook. Only our own people that understand. For example, only Samoan people understand the swear words that these people, these people are just posting out there. So the social media platforms, they can't really block, but only the person that use their account can do it from their side. And unless the social media platform providers allow those features so that the user can control it himself, because they can't control it if they put it out there in the world because of the different languages. And I know most of the countries, they haven't done the localization part, meaning that translating the English with these platforms on their own languages. Some countries do, but other countries don't. But we have this little, we have children that just born, like Jacqui said. Yes, I can't really confirm that's the right number, but yes, I know that's the sort of population we have. And the population, the young children, they're not really familiar, or they don't know this unless they come into that age, but they exposing themselves to the social media and the internet. So to answer that again, the question now, Anju, we have lately last year, we have the election and we have so much on the Facebook. I know that there's a lot of discrimination, sexual harassment. People come out, they hide themselves behind fake names, a lot of fake pages around at that time, promoting this and that. And the saddest thing is, it's a gender that distinguishes it. It's the gender that creates it. And one of the saddest thing is the female. It's a lady. When you find out it's not really a man, but it's a woman. So that's the saddest part. So it's not really the technology that, that harm it or disqualify what we can supposed to do, but it's the people. Is our people. As Jacqui said, education is the key of all this. If we educate our people, keep pondering of what to do, what not to do, then later on they learn and they see, you know, how safety they are when they're in the cyberspace. So I think, may I, and the other thing, before I forget, there are limited of policies and legislation out there, you know, to cover this kind of activity because it's new. I know it's new to some, especially us in the Pacific, but there's limited of policies and regulations out there to cover not only the providers, but also the users, the viewers. So there is a lot of education and awareness to be out there, you know, to educate our people of what to do, what to see, what not to see, you know, what to click and what not to click. So those little things that people needs to know. Thank you.
Great. Sarai, thanks for reiterating that you can't blame the technology and social media. And like you said, people need to be accountable for this, but it's also difficult to track the anonymous accounts. And Jacqui, you also mentioned this earlier when you did your entry point. And the language aspect that you brought up, I think it's very interesting because a lot of the social media giants and platforms, they're not well versed with the different languages from the different region, and how can they tackle this issue? So we need to have some sort of focal point or contact that can help with the situation, particularly when you have 100+ languages and dialects in one particular country. And also, you talked about discrimination and harassment during elections, because it's mostly the women and girls that are really targeted, and also the female politicians and leaders that are generally targeted. And I know that some of the journalists as well worldwide, we see a lot of that issue because they are always targeting journalists. But I like also the point you make that it's not generally a man that creates this problem, but it can also be a woman doing it to another woman. And I think this is an important point to make, because female rivalry is an issue in some parts of the world. And thank you for mentioning the policies, and also getting the views. And I think if you stay on a bit, I would like to understand how we can tackle this issue with policymakers. Jacqui, I'm going to come to you now. In your organization, the organization that you work with, your network, you've already mentioned the Tonga example, but can you give other initiatives that are happening in your organization, or also maybe examples from the communities that you work with? How do they tackle this issue, and what have they been doing?
Thanks, Anju. With the Pacific Girl program, the example in Tonga is probably one of our best ones, because it's actually been picked up and being replicated, which for us is the best thing that can happen. But we also have initiatives where we're looking at teenage pregnancy and how that's occurred, and we're looking at sort of online gender-based violence, but we're also looking at sort of education as well. How do we equip these adolescent girls and young women to not put themselves in a position where they may be harmed, especially when there's perpetrators and predators there. In terms of a lot of the work we do, to be honest, there's a lot of opportunity to do more online gender-based violence activity and prevention activities. In a lot of the communities where we work, there's a lack of access for online. But having said that, it is there. Sometimes when you're a big program and you come into town and you get the feedback, look, we don't have a lot of internet, but next thing everybody's on Facebook. So I guess the real challenge for every program is what we call the last mile. How do we not just get a poster out there in town or online, but how do we get it into people's homes and get people engaged and looking at these initiatives? So to be honest, I think there's a lot of opportunity for more initiatives beyond Pacific Girl and across the region, and we're keen to support those. But I guess in terms of the gender-based violence, it's online is a key area to be worked on, but there's also so much work to be done just to focus on gender-based violence itself, whether it's online or in person. And there's a lot of initiatives around trying to address what we call social norms or cultural norms that are harmful. So there's many norms that are very good: protection of family, love of family, respect for family, those sorts of norms and cultural approaches are what we really want to highlight, because as Sarai said, it's about the people. Yeah, so while we are supporting sort of initiatives that address online gender-based violence, the bulk of our work is really trying to support initiatives that focus on people and changing people. Not an easy job getting people to change their behaviors.
Great, thank you so much, Jacqui. You know, you mentioned last mile connectivity, which is a big concern, particularly in this region, when we want to connect the rural and remote communities. And you're right, like you also said earlier, it's always about the people. And of course, Sarai has also mentioned this. So thank you also for mentioning that the family support and the support groups is very crucial. One of the key things that I've noticed is that there are not many support groups that provide, you know, support when there's issues with suicidal. So how do you tackle that issue? What would be some of the support groups within your country or even your organization? Sarai, coming back to you, is your organization or network working on initiatives to address online gender-based violence?
Thank you, Anju, for that quick question. I'll talk about not really directly the online-based violence, gender-based violence, but in general, because our organization is academia and we cover all. So firstly, I'll talk about the network or the initiative that will be done with our network itself, because we have the last, in our last enrollment for this year, it's about 60 to 40%, 60% of women or female registered or enrolled in NUS. And our internet here, it's quite, we're open to everyone, open meaning that they access freely, but we've limited of access to porn site, you know, those sites that we filter. Surely they have their own access to their own phones, their own data that freely access to those sites. But for us, yes, we manage it. We have our firewall. Everything is out there to manage and control the access to internet, to those sites. So when it comes to our other, including with the Samoa Information Technology Society, and we're fortunate enough to have this project from the WWF, the Web Foundation, with the Pacific Digital Gender Scorecard. So I really acknowledge that that would be more like a baseline for us in the Pacific, especially as Samoan girls, to have that kind of information in place, because there's a big digital gap. When we started data collection, while we're still in the data collection mode this time, it's interesting to see that people have their hidden agenda, especially with this gender, the gender issue that Jacqui said. They have this hidden gender. Jacqui mentioned the culture. Yes, it's really affecting this kind of approach. The culture that the women or the female are treating them. During this pandemic, most of the women, they stay home, and the men that going out, in and out, but the women still stay home looking after the family, limited access to these devices. It's amazing when we collect the data and they said they have limited access. They have one phone, they share that phone. The only time he accessed the phone when they talk to their children. But given the time, to expose and browse on the internet, to search for other kind of information that might help them, that's limit. The men always take the phone, do the games, and they play the games on the phone. While maybe that time they give it to women, search more and do more, shopping online because they have the internet. But that's not happening. So it's amazing that we have this scorecard, because with this scorecard, we have, they give us five pillars to look for. That would be the internet access and women's empowerment, affordability of internet, the digital skills and education, relevant content and services for women, and online safety. So once we have done that data collection and make that report available, will be a baseline for for research and some data, some people that needs this kind of information. And just to add on to it and to end off with this question and Anju, the collaborative approach. And Jacqui already mentioned that sort of groups. I think that's where it's limited here in the Pacific as well. There's less, collaborative approach that we have now, but we need more. The technology comes with its own good and bad. It's just the people that, adopting it and using it, but that's where the education comes in. If we have that collaborative approach and combine with the sensitive reporting, that will advocate, the support from these media platforms, and it will reduce that risk if we have that collaborative. If we manage to do it in other areas, especially the ICT from the background, well, this is the first time I've been here on the camera, always behind the screen, but I like to share this. We provide the technology, make things easier as it comes first, but the people are using it. That's the main problem. So it's us, with this knowledge we have, we can share so that minimize and mitigate the risk we have, and then we improve on what is good for everyone. So that's my contribution. Anju, thank you.
Thank you, Sarai. You nailed it with cultural context, having evidence-based research and data to actually say that, okay, this is the issue in a particular country. What do we need to do to tackle that? And also, you talk about, again, it all comes down to people. How do we manage this as people? Because of course we need the right support groups. And Jacqui also mentioned that. Joining us today is Ruth Kissam from PNG. Ruth, welcome to this podcast. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And firstly, my apology for joining late. As I mentioned, I have a 1-month-old baby, so becoming a little bit fussy this morning. And thank you for having this conversation. I think it is timely, especially in countries where, in Papua New Guinea, where we have the internet being recently introduced with no sanctions. So this one makes it a really timely message to talk about. I work in the space of sorcery accusation related violence as a human rights activist, but then I also head up, or I sit as the board chair for the Advancing PNG Women Leaders Network. And we work in different areas of women, peace and security, women's leadership, and also we work in the space of economic empowerment for women. So being part of this is a really timely as well as an important discussion that I think that we should be having now. So thank you for having me.
Great. Thank you so much for that great introduction. Ruth, we want to know more about the situation in PNG. The ladies have talked about, social media as an influence. They talked about, you can't blame social media. You can't blame technology. You can't shut the internet down. What are some of the ways we can tackle online gender-based violence? Just a question to you. Do you think, from your perspective, how do you teach people about online gender-based violence? And from a human rights perspective, what are some of the things that you're doing to tackle this issue when it comes to social media platforms, or even, offline and online gender-based violence?
Let me just put it this way. Sometimes in some places, it's just violence right across the board. It's cyberbullying, cyber violence. It's just not, it doesn't have a gender to it. Any person they feel like attacking, they will attack. If it goes against their belief, because they're sitting behind a screen, they're using pseudonyms. So who cares what they say or do to another person? And that's what social media is doing. But then what I'm seeing in this country, and one of the biggest challenge I am facing in the space of sorcery accusation related violence, is when people put up pictures of women that are tortured. When they put up pictures of victims or survivors to say that this is what you do to a person, and then you have people, faceless people, getting on Facebook actually giving ideas. Now we have a very a population that is also very impressionable. People that are starting to learn things, and when you put it out there that this is how you kill a witch, others will now have their 2 cents going in saying that, yeah, that's right, this is what we do to them. Now, this is now normalizing what is a criminal behavior, because you have people hiding behind screens to say anything they want to say with names that do not match it's not even their names. And they're coming with fake photos. So how are you going to be able to go track them down to say that we'd like to enforce the cybercrime, which we have, cybercrime act that we have here in Papua New Guinea. We'd like to enforce that. But the thing is that how can you go after someone who's a faceless person coming up with all this, bullying, but not only bullying, they're educating the ones that do not know the facts around, different topics. And they're telling them it's okay to go kill a witch, because after all, she is a witch, so you should kill them, and this is how you do it. The challenge is in countries like Papua New Guinea, where, yes, we do have a cyber act, but the thing is that the enforcement is not yet in place. That makes it really hard. When you have bodies, statutory bodies that are supposed to have the enforcing arm to follow through, so that we have sanctions in place for people that are using fake names to come out with these kind of crimes. Because it is a crime when you start accusing someone of being a so-called witch or this kind of thing, or even saying that, women that are playing rugby and showing your thighs, you're easy prey. And then coming up with memes and stuff like that. So now this person is afraid to go out into the community because she knows that she's plastered all over social media and anybody would go after her. Now these are perpetrated by fake names. The challenge is real in how you manage that, and that enforcement needs to come from the statutory bodies before NGOs like myself or anybody else, human rights activists that are working in this space. For us to stand up for the rights of that person, we need the support and the backing of statutory bodies that are there to protect, firstly, regulate what is supposed to be their mandate. So if they don't regulate it, how do we now enforce something that is beyond our powers? And that's the challenge that we face now. I mean, I face within the space of sorcery accusation-related violence. We're trying to go after those people that are posting pictures and giving people ideas on how to torture women and all that. But then how can we go after faceless people when we cannot be able to get the help we need to actually track them down and prosecute them? So that's like a challenge that I would say a big challenge that we're faced with.
Great, thank you. Ruth, you're dealing with an important issue, sorcery and also witchcraft in PNG. And, I know that there's very little support group for women and girls who need to feel safe. My heart goes out to those women who are victims of this abuse, and it needs to stop now. In countries like PNG, even with the Cybercrime Act, like you said, you need enforcement. And I think it's good to have collaboration with people like you to tackle this issue. And I feel that you are our champion. You're giving me a bit of goosebumps here, because we need more women like you to address these issues. And you could also be targeted for this. And, we want you to also feel safe, because, this is very important. But thank you so much, Ruth, for bringing this really interesting perspective. I want to turn back to Jacqui and also Sarai, because Sarai, I believe you're leaving soon. Let's see how we can all tackle this as Pacific Islanders, and what would be some of your key recommendations to social media tech giants, to like Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and what would you say to policymakers in your country, particularly when Ruth talked about this big issue, even with the Cybercrime Act? How do we deal with this? So Jacqui, we'll start with you. Sarai, we'll start with you.
Okay, thanks, Anju. Our first point, it's the respect. It's from the family. It's from your internal your community. Everything starts from your family. So if you respect other people, then others respect you. So when you go out to other communities, you will earn that. If you respect others, I think that's my simple message to out there, to pay respect your colleagues, respect whoever. Even when you type on your computer and send a message, do it in a respectful way, so that other people can fall into it and they follow what you are doing. And my second one, it's to build more mutual understanding now with us ladies that we're working with this kind of environment. I always work behind the screen, like I said before, we always try to build a mutual understanding so that what we insert or what we input into the system, process it, and comes out input what we expected. So it's something like that. It's the cycle. It's a cycle of things that we need to understand. So the mutual understanding should be out there. Both the developers, those who provide these social media platforms, and us, the viewers, the users. So the understanding should be there, especially with the cyber risk and whatever impacts that are associated with. And second, and the third one is the education. We need more education to educate our people. More awareness program out there. Sometimes don't believe what you see unless you're firm and you're sure enough. That's the right thing to do. I think it's easy as that. When you work on your computer, I always talking from my experience, always on a computer. So you need to be careful when you don't know what's the email from. Just hover over the email address and see what's the URL there. Is it a good one or not? Then click on it. Just think before you click on something that you are not sure of. And my last one, just think before you click. I think it's easy as that, because we are clicking on the link and connect you to the world. Because the internet comes out for good, we experience that. Internet comes out with the technology, comes out with a good, the good initiative that benefits for all. But if you think properly, especially as ladies and women, if we think properly, then you click it, then you see the whole world, and it's what the world can give you. Technology, women, whatever sort of platforms or whatever sort of parameters. So it's us that it's a people. It all comes down to people. Thank you.
Great, Sarai, thank you so much for that intervention. I think, again, you mentioned people and respect. We need to respect each other. I think that's a really good point. And thank you for sharing some perspectives, for basically you outlined some of the cyber safety tips, which is great because it works out well with Get Safe Online initiative. On that note, we would like to thank you for joining this, and I will continue the discussion with Jacqui, Ruth.
Thanks, Anju. Just to reflect on something Sarai said around, it's all about people and respect. This is really an issue that is not just here in the Pacific, it's a global issue. And I really want to highlight that. A recent research across 31 countries, it found that 58% of girls and young women, that's nearly 2 in 3, are actually suffering harm from online gender-based violence, from online abuse. Yeah, and what the research also found was, and this was through a survey, the highlights found that often the girls are being targeted online just for being young and female, literally because of their gender. And it also adds that it gets worse for women and girls who are politically outspoken. And Ruth, you've talked to that. People with a disability, people with different racial identity, or LGBTQI, SOGIESC as well. So just to highlight, the whole issue is around power imbalance. And it's around about it's all about gender, whether it's online or in person, but certainly online, it exponentially increases the opportunities for perpetrators to cause harm. And this is an issue. So what's the solution, Anju, as you've asked? As mentioned earlier, there really is a need to try to educate social media users to better protect themselves. Yeah. Now, just to be clear again, it's not their responsibility. Perpetrators are always in the wrong. There is never an excuse for violence, but let's try to help people protect themselves from people who do feel that they need to perpetrate violence. So help to educate. A second thing is, we need to really try to implement more online protection measures. And as we talked about earlier, and Sarai mentioned, with the Pacific, it's a particular challenge because there's a real blind spot with Pacific languages on social media. There's literally no autofill that can tackle languages and can translate Pacific languages. So already we have a very unique and significant problem in this region. But again, we can work with some of these platforms to try to create better measures for protection. And of course, we can support initiatives. We can help NGOs, we can help development partners to get out there in the field and to try to create local solutions that are locally led, that are going to have the best impact, and building on the lessons learned. Probably undertaking a little bit more research would be helpful. We know the issues, but it's good to have research to really make sure it's an evidence-based approach. So the third aspect is really pushing more initiatives to try to tackle this problem. Another comment just to say, we also perhaps as we tackle this problem, we also need to consider beyond just online to sort of SMS phone texting and pixting. This is a big issue. There's a lot of catfishing, not just online, but also through mobile phone use. So that's a big issue. And I think something that we've all mentioned, the final thing is, it's with us. It's with the people. It's with each of us. Call it out. Every time we're silent, we're probably adding to the problem. So this is where we need to educate our family members, our peers, and we need to also walk the talk, which sometimes is really difficult. And I feel for you, Ruth, when you put yourself out there, you do the right thing, but you also expose yourself, so that it comes off it at a personal cost, and it's difficult. But this is what we need to do. We need to call it out. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. You mentioned, we need to have better measure for protection. How can development partners create local solutions and make sure that it's locally led? I think these are some great points that you mentioned. And you talked about mobile phones, and I think tackling this problem even with the telcos and the regulators in the country is really important too. And you all mentioned education, raising awareness, and walking the talk. I'm a biggest fan of walking the talk. Don't just talk about it, do something about it, and call it out if you see this problem online or even offline. Thank you so much for those amazing words, Jacqui. Ruth, what do you think? What would you say some of the key recommendations should be for tech giants like Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram? And what would you tell the policymakers in your country based on the work that you're doing, and also the situation that you face? How do we get them to listen?
Thank you, Anju. Jacqui made some very key points. And from a country like Papua New Guinea, where we have languages that are diverse, people actually go into Pidgin to write something where they attack another. And it's hard for Facebook to actually be able to translate. But then when they have pictures, they can easily be able to say that, okay, so the picture is gruesome, or the picture, shows partial nudity or stuff like that. But if it's just something, words that they're using, and if they are using, say, languages that are not picked up by Facebook, and if it's in Pidgin, the attack would go on for days before it meets the requirement for the community standards to say that, okay, so we have this much people reporting, so that means that it must be something that is, harassment. But if it's just one person raising a point saying that, look, they're attacking this person, the languages that are using harassment, could you please take this post down? Or it becomes hard when they're using languages that is not recognized by Facebook. And that is on one or two occasions, I've been able to, we had to go around, use a lot of other people within Facebook to say that, look, this is what is happening. Could we have you report this, this comment that is up, so that Facebook will take it down? That's one of the things. Another one of the other problem that I'm also seeing in a country like Papua New Guinea is when you have people that are not educated to use Facebook at that level, where anything can come out, whether it's to do with harassment against another, COVID, all this misinformation, they can just put it out there. And who's going to hold them accountable? Again, going back, policymakers, if they can be able to come up with something, especially to say that us using Facebook without our names, what we're registered with, then that could be something that would go against, say, NICTA's policy. And NICTA is the body that basically covers the telco in our country. If we can have something like that, And it might, some people might say that, but it goes against people's right. If they don't want to use the name, it might, they might have a point saying that, but right now, the harassment that is going on, the violence that is going on perpetrated against people on social media platform is such that we're actually, it's going into a space where it's really hard for us to keep a lead on it. So the government might as well come in to do that, provide that structure until such time that people are able to use it responsibly, because we want that. We want responsibility from users. And unless we do that, this attacks that is going against individuals is going to go out of proportion. And we've had it, I've had it, other people have had it. Those, like you said earlier, people that are standing up for another, being a voice. The only way that you shut them down is you come out of nowhere, faceless, nameless, and then there's a mob attack that is going on. It's like a mob lynch on one person. Now, this person, either gets shut down because there is no support, or you lose a voice in a very critical space. So that's where we need policymakers to actually come in to back up, mostly, especially people that are standing up for the human rights defenders. We've had instances where amazing voices that have been shut down because of this mob lynching. I'm calling mob lynching because it's like out of nowhere, everyone comes in and they just attack the one person. And these are mostly faceless people. Imagine if we had regulation in place that says that you cannot be able to use Facebook without logging in with your passport or your national identity card or something that is formal. So in this way, we know who the person is that is posting such and such. And yes, you can be able to, but do it responsibly. So in this way, we can be able to regulate the harassment that is going on. That's because it's just getting out of hand. And this is extreme, but it's because it's getting out of hand. Maybe the last point that I'd like to make is individuals. We need to stand up for each other. When you see the mob, faceless mob, attacking someone, we need people, the good ones, to actually go for that person. Because what I'm seeing is when someone comes up and then when you have others supporting that person to say that, look, this person has a right. If he or she wants to say this or do this, they have a right to do that. This woman, if she's standing up for, or she's picking a voice, and you have all these other women supporting or men supporting organizations supporting her, it makes others that are attacking her, it sort of acts as a deterrent because this person has support. But when they don't have a support, she's fair game or he's fair game. And that would be what I would say, stand up for them. Unless there's education for people to use Facebook, we'll still have this thing that is getting out of hand. And so that's where the policymakers need to come in. Especially for a country like Papua New Guinea, put your foot down. Yes, it might go against people saying that this is against freedom of expression and all that, but when freedom of expression is actually attacking and arresting someone, then we might as well put in that so that there might be responsibility where it's being used.
Thank you, Ruth. Responsibility comes with common sense, and I'm glad you mentioned this, Ruth. And we need a collective voice when dealing with such issues. Policy makers need to be accountable when dealing with this issue. So champions like you can make a difference. We also feel that, sometimes these policymakers need education and awareness on how to tackle these issues. In my role of work, when we work with policymakers, sometimes they want to help, but they just don't know how to do it or how to bring in the right people to actually be part of that, a solution to these problems. And having stakeholder consultations is key, and bringing in voices like yours, Jacqui, Isekeli, Sarai, I think to change their mindset and to get them to understand how to deal with it is very key. And standing up for each other is very important. People tend to fear. But when you are in a big group fighting this and protecting the vulnerable people, then things usually change. But I also understand that sometimes people just sort of hold back because of various reasons. But I think, again, we need champions like yourselves to be part of this solution.
So my thought is pretty simple. We just need to end violence against women and girls, minority groups, online and offline, in the home, on the internet, on the phone. We just need to end gender-based violence, and it's going to take a little while. It's probably going to take a long while, And we need to do this not just in the Pacific, but globally. But I guess in this context today, what's really critical, and Ruth, you've alluded to this quite nicely, is that with the online space, the problem is the same. The problem is gender-based violence. It's largely men and boys perpetrating violence, largely against a person because of their gender. But what's happening is with online, they're getting so many more channels and opportunities to exponentially increase the reach and the harm of this messaging, of the harm that they want to cause. So we really need to tackle online gender-based violence before it proliferates beyond control, if not already, if we want to address gender-based violence at all. On this online space, it's really key. And how we do that, it's a very difficult challenge. And again, Ruth and Sarai have mentioned some really key points, and it's that impunity, the anonymity, that's a really key issue, that it really adds to the power game. You know, gender inequality, it's all about power imbalance. And when people are anonymous, they have so much power. They feel that there is no impunity for them, and that's a big issue that's making this problem all the worse. So my message is gender-based violence must end. We just got to keep working at this. It's wrong. It's against human rights. You know, it's a human rights violation for women and girls primarily, but for other minority groups as well. And we need to really address this in the online space if we have any hope of doing it in the broader context of online and offline. Thanks, Anju.
Great. Thank you so much, Jacqui, for those final words. Ruth, over to you.
To everyone that is going through this, you are not alone. My message is you are not alone just because it's within your screen, it's your phone. That doesn't make it a private thing for you. Talk about it. We have to get our children to make them see that, especially those perpetrators online, will isolate them in the way that they're attacking them. To say that, look, you sent me this photo, I'm going to publish it. I'm going to make it look like this and that, and then, you know, and then I'm going to show everyone about it. So if you want to go public with the photo you sent me, you know, these are some of the things that they do going after young people, young children. We've got to make our young people, our women, our girls feel less of a victim, and for them to say that, look, what they're trying to do is to make you look like the one that initiated it. So then it's now back to the women and the girls. The attack gets even worse because it happens within the space of the phone, or within their say WhatsApp, or within their Instagram inbox, or the Facebook inbox. So nobody knows about this. So you're the one that is doing, they keep on attacking them. We need to make them understand you're not alone in this. There's a lot of people that are willing to help you get over this, willing to help you. We will not be looking at you as, you know, someone that went out there, sent pictures to this person or that person. What the other person is doing is exploiting you. We need to make them understand, because what they're doing, they're going through the violence themselves because they feel victimized, and they also feel guilty. They're being taken for a guilt trip by the other person. So now that's where it's becoming worse for them. So education needs to happen to the young women and girls that are going through this, that look, you're not alone and nobody judges you in this. We need to get over the person in the wrong is the other person, the other one that is doing this. Another thing for women that are going against and also attacking other women, we need to stop, because what we're doing is we're setting ourselves up. We're not doing it only to the other one, we're doing it to our gender. And that has to stop, because it's not only men that are perpetrating this violence, it's women that are attacking other women too online. And that needs to stop, because someone else might be more beautiful, more smart, wears a bikini. And because we're Pacific Islanders, we'd rather go around with our lap or our sarongs. We're attacking this one in bikini. And now she becomes fair game to everyone else, because other women are attacking her. So men feel she is much more easier for me to attack. So that also we need to stop that, because we are setting ourselves as a gender up to be attacked by others. So what I would say, my last word, and I'm going around in circles again, is you're not alone. The moment you speak up, you're putting a stop to another young person going through it, because looking at your experience, he or she will easily be able to take their phone to their parents or someone older than them to say that, look, this is what's going on in my inbox. This person is attacking me, or that put up my photo as a meme. And this is what I feel. So then you have a community of people helping you and supporting you. So don't do this alone.
Thank you so much. I want to echo what Jacqui said. End violence against women, girls, minority groups, marginalized groups, and also persons with disability that are usually left out of the equation. And Ruth, what you said, empower women and girls, give them the power to tackle this issue. And we are not alone. They are not alone. So please, ladies and women, girls, everyone, get in touch with us or the Get Safe online team to help you find a solution, but also to navigate around these issues. And we also have good support groups in the Pacific that can support you and be, your voice in case you feel threatened or, there's any issues that you're facing online. So we're here for you. And like Ruth said, you're not alone. So let's tackle this together. On this note, Jacqui and Ruth, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a great and interesting podcast for me. I really enjoyed it. Now we will try to get Isikeli to join this podcast. So please feel free to leave the room while I sort out the issue with Isikeli.
Thanks, Anju.
Isikeli's video and audio. Sorry, not Isikeli. Thank
Hi,
you so
Ruth.
much, Jacqui. Ruth,
Bye-bye.
we will be
Bye,
in
Jacqui.
touch.
Bye, Anju. Nice meeting you, and thank you for having me.
Ruth, just
Thank
for your information, so we've started this specific gender scorecards, and so there's, the digital ICT cluster team. They're working with like Priscilla, Winifred, Christelle. They're working on this really good evidence-based research and data collection. And I'm not sure if you are well versed with them, you know them, but I can put you in touch because it would be good for you to join that research. And also provide your perspective. I think you've made some interesting points, and we need to use that for some of our work that we're doing. And I work for the World Wide Web Foundation, so we do quite a lot of work on digital inclusion, gender scorecards, gender divide, ICT, digital. So we work with the governments, we work with the civil society, various industries and organizations. So I'll keep you in the loop. And for you to join some of our initiatives. So this is not going to be one-off, it'll be a follow-up. Thank you so much, Ruth. And please continue to be our champion. You're an amazing person. Thank you so much. Take care of yourself.
Talk soon.
Talk soon. We've come to an end, and we would like to thank you. And I hope the audience listening today will have enjoyed the discussions. I certainly did. I think there's so much to talk about, but again, like I said, let's leave it to another podcast. So thank you, and Fafaitai, and Vinaka Vaka level to all, and take care and stay safe.